Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
Well, hey, today we're doing a continuation with dialoguing with Pietze about her history and some of her pain and her transition with God, church, parents. Today we're going to dive in. If you haven't heard of that, go back and listen to it so we don't have to do a huge recap. Part 1 and 2.
And I would say, just before we jump into more of her story, I think me and you both have gone on that same journey. Yeah. Do you want to talk about yours at all?
As far as the kind of getting out of and going back into, we've talked a little bit back in some of our history, some of our former podcasts about this. I was definitely part of some major institutions that all fell apart.
Oh my gosh. If we told this history of the amount of crazy churches you were a part of, it was like you had a magnet for the most extreme crazy things.
Oh, yeah.
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 And, I don't feel like I've fully heard these
you
stories.
Just tell
so like,
the one
super
story
intrigued.
of the one church that kept wanting you to go to the small group and you're like,
Oh, yeah. There was a church in Hollywood and it was right in the middle of Hollywood, and they were taking care of homeless people. And there's some really awesome things that we were seeing with homeless people getting really touched and cool stuff. And so I love that part of it. But there was some pretty attractive guys that were part of a men's Bible study, I guess.
Oh gosh.
That kept asking, that they were like, "Hey man, do you want to be part of this Bible study that we're doing?" And I was like, "No, I don't." I don't know why, but everything about this is pushing like
all my red flags.
Oh, massively. I was like, "Oh no, I'm good." And they'd be like, "Okay, well," and they just kept kind of checking in, like, "Are you sure? You know, good guys in there?" No, I'm good. I'm good. So, kind of begins to unfold that there's some rumblings of something going on, and another leader came to that church to speak, like an outside guest speaker, and Pietze talked a little bit about the concept of the prophetic and kind of seeing and having kind of like insight into God's heart for stuff. And he had this imagery of something going on and contacted another leader that was outside of that specific church that was kind of over it and was like, there's something crazy going on with the head pastor and the men inside of the church. I could see it. This is what I think's happening. Well, it come to find out that the Bible study was this place where he was convincing all the guys to perform like oral sex on each other and give each other like hand jobs and things like that. And it was like this weird cult-like thing that was taking place. And these were all like, we're not talking like these were gay men. These were all straight men that were being convinced to participate in sexual activities. And he was convincing them, I swear to God, he was convincing them that he was the reincarnation of Jesus.
Are you kidding?
People are very
my
charismatic.
mouth just like hit the floor right now.
But I've been part of that. That's not
one of many
that I was part of. And so the fact that I even participate within the context of the institution and haven't lit fire to all of it and burned it to the ground is really a testament of the journey of the goodness of God and the reality of God's love and the healing of my own heart inside of my process and resolution that I have. It doesn't mean that I don't ever have some negative emotions here and there when I see stuff or feel a little triggered, but for the most part, I'm just like, oh, okay.
You know what is crazy to me about that story though, is the fact that one person can manipulate people into doing things that they would never do or believing things that they would never believe. You know, you have one charismatic leader.
Right, totally.
And it's like, that's where so much pain comes from, is because when you're in something, you can't see the forest for the trees.
And here's the other crazy thing and I've talked to people about this before, is that the radical transformation for the people that weren't participating in his space, but that was happening in Hollywood with all the drug addicted homeless people that were coming off the streets, was something I'd never seen before. And it was real. It was tangible. People were actually getting helped and healed, and they were feeling loved. And then there was the other group that were being violated and abused inside of the structure. And someone asked me one day, how do you make sense of someone who is so destructive in their nature, yet the move of God is tangible? Like how can that coexist?
How can you hold those two?
How can you hold those realities in tension? And I'm like, well, because to me it's a sign that God truly does love us in the midst of our darkness, and is all he's desiring to do is to get to humanity in and through any avenue possible. So if it's going to be someone who is almost psychopathic in their behavior, he's like, that's fine. I'll totally operate inside of the bounds of the darkness of your box, just as long as I can be present with humanity here, in hopes that my love will actually make a transformation inside of your experience. And what it did for me is it's the move of God, like actually the product of goodness and love and life inside of the context of an institution, stop being the validation for the idea that everything someone has to say is right.
Well, and I think this is where people abandon themselves in their discernment.
Right.
Because they're like, well, I feel controlled all the time by this person, but look at all these miracles that are happening.
Yeah, these cool things, lives being changed. And
I think that there is this beautiful gift in seeing, even when you look in the Bible, like just God uses not uses people. That's a bad way to say it, but like God participates with people who are messy and broken and screwed up, and he's involved because he loves invitations to be around all of us. Yeah, that has nothing to. So you might find somebody who has an incredible anointing and isn't safe to follow. Right. And that doesn't, and that I think is what is confusing, especially if people had parents that were unsafe, but also acted like there's so many reasons that it can be so triggering. And I wanted to say this, we're going to talk a lot today about our journeys through having pain with church and going back in and finding that healthy relationship with an institution where it's not codependence and it's not independence. It's like a healthy interdependence. But I do just want to say there are some people who've been so broken by church and by what has happened that you just need to know that you have permission to take care of your heart and be safe as long as you need to.
Right. Yeah. Just like Pietze, it was like, hey, I needed a 5-year journey to go on. And
because the wounds can be so deep, because church wounds hit, not only can it be abusive, but it becomes spiritually abusive, where not only do you believe your leader, but then you believe that God feels about you the way your leader is telling you.
Because they're supposedly the face and voice of God.
And that can be so devastating to people's souls and bodies and spirits and hearts. So I just want to, for those of you out there who have been spiritually abused, who have gone through crazy things, I think the same thing, it took you a couple years. It took me a couple years.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went through a process. I mean, I went out of that season and then jumped into a season where I traveled with a traveling minister and kept seeing everyone's mess behind the lines in all these major ministries. And even the ministry that I was part of, there was messiness inside of it. And I had to detox myself for quite a few years afterwards, where I was like, I'm just burnt out and I don't want to be sitting on a Sunday anywhere. And I want to just be connecting with myself and God, and I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then you've also seen a huge value for it on the other side.
Deep. I've been profoundly affected by people who are inside the institution who there's a purity of heart where they're just like, we're really trying to love the best that we know how. And I lifted the high stakes off of everyone's actions, because nobody's deified any longer to me inside of leadership. I'm like, these are all just messy people like myself, and we're all just trying to do our best. And I also found my own sense of self, really. Right. I don't feel like they can control me. At the end of the day, they can call me up and say, I don't like what you just said on your podcast. I'm like, I don't care. Not out of a bitterness or resentment. I'm like, I don't care.
Right.
Yeah.
It's none of your business. I'm a grown ass man.
Yeah.
I'm an adult. So you're welcome to have your opinion of me. I'm not controlled by it. So I don't have to defend myself any longer by it. You're not God.
That being said, you're an 8-9. So that being said, if they called you up and said, we have some concerns about this on your podcast, you would say like, well, I'm going to do what I feel is right. And then you would go and you would process and be like, do I feel like this is right? How do I feel about this? And you would take it and you'd process it out with God and your people.
I do process things out with people. I think that as far as when I say I don't care, it's not going to be the thing that manages my life.
Yeah, but I wanted to say, because I think some people legitimately just throw an FU wall up.
Totally.
And that's not what you do. You actually say, I'm going to set my strong boundaries, but then I'm going to go process and see if I feel like what you had to say is wise.
I'm always looking for wisdom, even if it comes out of the most foolish mouth. I'm like, is there anything hidden, any golden nuggets inside of it? And am I
chew
settled?
the meat and spit out the bones?
Yeah, sure. So.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because we have, and I kind of wish I could impart this to people, but because we do heart health stuff, we have had there's a lot of different Christian circles in the world, but in our Christian circle, we know things about almost every famous Christian person in our Christian circle.
Right.
Because their assistant or their lover or their mistress or their whatever has come and worked through things with us. We have heard all of the secrets from all of the people, and sometimes because they've come and processed all of it with us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I would like to say is just no one is above being human.
Yep.
Right.
The most famous Christians that we put on a pedestal are a mess still. They have pain like I have pain. Like that's why we try really hard on this podcast to be like, me and Justin have to work through stuff all of the time. Yep. We are not perfect. We hurt people. We trigger. We are trying to figure out a way through our mess. We are like, there is no leader out there who has it all together.
Well, because no person is exempt from pain. Yeah. And pain makes a mess.
Pain drives dysfunction.
Yeah.
And really our goal is to humanize humanity. Yeah. Our humanity and everyone else's. And once we can get everyone back to being humans, then it's like, okay, not only can we process their behavior differently, we can also have grace and compassion for ourselves and them as well. And it's
and not just that, because when you are able to accept your own humanity, you're able to actually let God love you in your humanity.
Totally.
You know, like there's a process of accepting that you're not a perfect person, that you're human, but that's where grace, that's where God's love comes in.
Totally.
You know?
So many people though, just throw out the baby with the bathwater. It's like they put a leader on a pedestal and then they meet the leader and they're like, oh my gosh, you're an a-hole. And then it devastates them so much they can't recover.
Yeah.
And being in a culture where celebrity Christians abound, where we live, there is a real thing where I see people hit such huge disillusionment pockets.
Yeah.
Because we all want a hero.
Yeah.
That we think is perfect.
We also want to aspire to be perfect. So when we see an anointed leader, what we would say anointed, which would be somebody very gifted, who we would say, oh, that God's hand is on them, or you can feel God on them. You know, I want to be like that. So we raise them up and subconsciously create perfection around them. And then the minute that person disappoints us or hurts us, then we're devastated, you know, and you end up like Abby said,
and then it's like, what can I believe in? Nothing I believe is true. There's no good Christians out there. Nobody is. And it's this interesting thing because I'm like, honestly, most of the time, the people I meet who are the best humans are never the famous Christians. And I'm not saying we're all the worst, but I'm like, if you're going to be a famous Christian, you're going to be in a lot of pain all the time because you're going to have people coming after, like,
attacking, rejecting,
and then using you. There's so many things that happen that you're going to be in pain all the time and you're going to be reactive.
Yes.
And so you're going to have your deepest cracks and foundations showing up. And so like there, it's just always going to be that way. So I wish I could give that to people, so that you could see you're not perfect and yet you still bring something that is necessary on the planet. And that has given me so much hope. Like, I'm not perfect, but I still can show a little part of God to people. I'm not perfect, but I can still give hope to people. I can still encourage people. And that beautiful thing of, instead of doing it black or white, you're good or bad. Because that's what all humans are trying to do. This church is good or bad. This pastor is good or bad.
Because
my husband is good or bad.
You know, subconsciously we feel safe with black and white. If I can discern, if I can know it, then I can figure out how to feel safe. The problem is most of life is in the gray.
It's all nuanced.
It's not black or white. You can't actually find your safety in black or white. But that's why we go into judgment, is because we're subconsciously trying to feel safe.
Yes. And I'm literally like, I am the best and the worst.
Yes.
That's just true. If you were following me, there'd be things I did so great that bring so much healing. And there'd be things that I did that really trigger you and frustrated you and maybe hurt you and devastated you. Like, that is just humanity. And that ability to be able to hold the good and bad. That's why people are always like, well, if I had that job, then I'd feel good. That's when we can't hold good and bad at once. And be like, no, if you had that job, these things would be good and other things would be hard. Well, if I had this much money, it'd be good. We have this judgment thing that we do on the inside, which is something is good and something is bad, instead of recognizing life is the marriage of the two and learning how to love and be loved in the midst of both.
That's really good.
So you want to hear Pietze's story now?
I want to hear your story.
You want to hear Pietze's story now?
Well, he pointed at you. I was like, telling me, get on over there. Quit ranting, Abby. You're on a soapbox.
I love it. Get on that soapbox. Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting because, like, even as you're talking, I'm processing through so much of my journey and how I learned those things along the way. But it really took me, you know, hitting rock bottom, which I talk a lot about in the last episode. But you know, I think where we left off, I had found God again, which was so powerful. But at that point, I said, God, we're good. I love you. I'll spend the rest of my life with you, but I'm never stepping back foot in a church again. Like, this is great, but don't ever ask that of me. And I think I sat there for about maybe 2 years, where it's like, nope, I'm not. Like, I will never be a part of that culture again. I will never do that again. I'm not even sure that I really believe in its good or what it does. And I remember, like, this is what I love about God and what I realize is lacking in our culture, in Christian culture, but he is so patient. Like, he's not freaked out about process. Like, he's such a God. He loves process and we love outcome. So we're always trying to get to outcome, but he sits in the process because he loves to father in the process. And if you have outcome, you don't need a father. You have the results.
You don't need
You're
the
good.
relationship. You have results.
And he rests in the process because he loves relationship. And so what I love about the process that God took me through is I was so fathered in patience. And, you know, I mean, that can be triggering for some people because most people have not had a very patient father, if a father at all. You know, and so understanding who he is outside of your relationship, which you guys have a great product for that, the Father series that's literally all about this, that I think if this is a triggering thing to you would be worth going through.
Absolutely.
But understanding who he is as a father was what helped me so much go on the journey because he was so patient. So when I would say things like that, I felt no shame or condemnation from God. I felt understanding and compassion for why. He saw the whole story. He understood why I would feel that way. And he had compassion for it. But I remember one day, because God can be so tender and kind with me. And then he can also be really strong at points.
Straightforward.
And really straightforward. But it doesn't feel like condemnation. It actually feels like life to me. It actually feels like help. It feels like someone throwing you a life vest or a life ring and saying, hey, I'm going to help you out, kid. You know? And so I remember one day I was just talking to God about church and just saying, like, because I think at this point, my husband and I had started to make friends with some people who were in a church. And just like through mutual people. And I was just, and they kept inviting us. And I was like, no, we're good. Thanks. And I remember talking to God about it. And I remember God saying to me, like, how can you hate something that I love so much? Like, if we're going to have a relationship, like, I don't want this hatred in your heart because it's actually separating you from me, you know? And I just knew. It was like, I knew, and I cried. I knew that it meant that I had to face my fear. I had to face my pain, you know? And so I took my time with it. I just said, okay, God, I need time to process. I need time to work through this. And I felt so much patience, so much grace. I just felt him holding my hand like, you're good. Be in your process, but I'm going to walk with you and you're going to do this together. And that's what I love about God as a father, is that he doesn't make us not face the hard thing, but he holds our hand through it, saying you're not going to be alone facing it. And for most people, your parents just said, you need to do the hard thing. And then you faced it alone. Or they never made you face hard things. And so you're crippled in life, you know, but he still makes us face the hard thing, but you're not alone in it. And so my husband was touring in a band at that point, so I was alone a lot, and I was living in Wisconsin where I didn't know a lot of people. And so that's where even like a lot of the community started to come from this church. So I remember going to stepping foot in the church building on a Sunday morning, and I was shaking on the inside because I was facing every trigger that I had. All of my church pain was showing up the minute I pulled into that parking lot.
That has to happen for so many people.
Oh my gosh, it was terrifying. And I was by myself, so I wasn't with anyone. I didn't know anyone. And I mean, I knew people, but it was a big church. I didn't know if I'd find them. And when I walked in, I didn't see anyone. And I remember telling God, I was like, can you just be like a husband to me right now? Like, can you just hold me right now so that I don't feel alone? Because I feel so scared and I feel so alone. And of course, like, it's funny because right off the bat, I remember walking in and I went to sit somewhere and some old lady was like, there was nowhere to sit. So I found like this one chair in the back corner and I was like, perfect, I'll just stay in the back corner. And she's like, excuse me, you can't sit there. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm so sorry, you know. But at that point, like,
you're like,
oh my gosh, run away, you know. But I was like, no, you can be here. So I just sat in the back and I didn't make myself participate. It was baby steps. I just made myself be there. Just be here and don't abandon yourself here.
Yes.
Don't abandon yourself by forcing yourself to perform or do what everybody else is doing in worship or however else they're acting. And don't abandon yourself by running away. Just be here and be present and let God love you here. And so I did that week after week, and I would cry and it was hard. And then eventually I started to feel safe again. I started to feel like, no, I am not going to lose my sense of self here. Like, I can actually stay connected to myself even here. You know,
it's so interesting. I was thinking just when you're sharing that about when I was going through deconstruction, it was such a big deal to be like, if I don't want to stand during worship, I'm not.
Oh, absolutely.
And when I say that now, it sounds ridiculous, but like, I honestly like always felt like I had, they're like, leaders are always doing this. And if you love God and if you worship, like, there's so
follow
many
what
things
everyone else is doing.
It's that you have to engage and you always have to push in and connect and blah. And I was like, sometimes when I am sitting down with my eyes closed and it looks like
Taking
I
a
hate
nap.
everything. Well, actually, I feel great about taking a nap in worship. I feel like that's a really holy thing to do. But I also like sometimes when I look like I hate my life the most, I'm really connected to myself.
Yeah.
And but I remember the idea of, am I going to try to be who I'm supposed to look like I am? Because I spent a long time with all of the rules. I should be doing this. I should look like this at church. And instead, when I was like, no, I'm however I find God. If I need to walk around, and because that's how I find God. If I need to go talk to people, because that's how I find God. If I need to leave, because that's how I find God. And all of those things happened to me when I started going back to church. It was a very slow progression. I think I felt the same thing, where it was like a little tiny drink at a time. And sometimes I would feel nothing in the church. I would be like, this is dumb. I hate church. I hate it for all these reasons. Everybody, you know, and it's very easy to generalize your pain about every person and to generalize your skepticism. And one of the beautiful things that I've learned is to hold that nuance now, where I can say, yeah, there are performers who are fake in here. And there are people who have genuine love and connection in here. And this room is filled with both. And often I'm no longer labeling that I can decide who an entire group of people is based on my past experiences and a few things that look the same about these people.
Yep, absolutely. And I love that you said that, because I remember even there were times where, okay, like now I'm starting to feel more comfortable. So I'm worshiping like they worship. I'm doing what they do. And they had a high emphasis on really being exuberant and like looking a certain, or like doing certain things, which I thought was great. And I love that for them. And I would do that. And I remember specifically times where God would be like, I want you to sit down right now. I want you to sit down and connect. And I could tell, because I'm like, oh, I'm dissociating and going back into performance.
I'm disconnected feel like I belong from my own emotions and just
and from myself,
following through the actions or whatever.
And so like I had to really stay close to my sense of self so that I could stay close to my connection with the Father, you know, with God, and not lose myself and abandon myself through the process.
So good.
You know, and it was interesting because in this church specifically, there were ways that they were very strict on a lot of things, but in some ways that was actually really healing to my heart, because I knew that their leaders
had a higher standard than the one you just came from.
Yes, had a much higher standard than the one that I just came from. So in some ways, I actually felt safer within more of a rigid structure, because I knew that like, okay, there's really, really high standards here. Now there's good and bad to that, you know, and there was some hard things about that I had to be really guarded and careful about, that I didn't fall into legalism or performance. But there was a really good sense of me staying tethered to myself. And I think as I was coming back into church, and they have a strong church culture. Like it's a very strong culture. And so I had to be really careful to, one of the things that I did that I really appreciate that I did is that I would listen to different music and different teachings from all different denominations. And that kept me really, really balanced, because
so you weren't believing this is the one place and this is the one way that God does it, and the way they say is the voice of God.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is one thing that I was very conscious of, because the ministry that I was a part of that blew up had very much had that sense. This is what God is doing. This is the thing that's going to change the world. This is what God is doing. And I remember thinking, the minute you start thinking that is like, it's the pride before the fall, you know, it's the minute that it comes tearing down. And so this new church structure that I came into, or institution, had very much, that wasn't being preached, but the culture said that.
Yes.
Right.
The culture really spoke like, this is what God is doing. And so I very much would challenge it all the time. Like I tell people, well, yeah, this is one thing that God is doing, but you go to Africa and see what this ministry is, and that's changing Africa. And this ministry in New York is changing New York. And another thing too, is that as I started to get deeper into the church, I wasn't afraid to question things and have hard conversations with the leaders.
Yeah.
So when somebody would tell me something like, oh, blah, blah, like if you believe that, that's not going to work, I would go to the leader and say, okay, I heard this. What's your view on that? Rather than making an assumption about what the leadership believed, I allowed them to have a voice, because then I knew, if you do believe that, I'm not going to be okay, because I need the ability to believe something different.
Totally.
Yeah.
You know, or if you do, and 9 times out of 10, we would end up having a great conversation where they're like, well, this is what we would say about that. How do you feel about that? And I'd be like, no, I can live. Like, if we're good, like if
as long as you're okay with me believing what I believe.
Yeah, then I'm great, because I love that you guys believe, like I can understand why you guys believe that, and I can honor that.
Yeah.
You know,
but I need to be able to believe what I believe.
Yeah, totally. And so I allowed myself, because I think often what happens is that, like what we said in the last podcast, you dissociate from something like that happens where it crosses your boundaries. And rather than leaning in and being like, what's making me feel unsafe right now about this? And what kind of conversations do I need to have to create safety?
Yeah.
You just dissociate from it because you're afraid of losing community, or you're afraid of losing the good things about it. But the problem is that unsafety grows over time to the point where something really happens. And then you completely, the pain is so deep because you've been you've been disregarding yourself the whole time, you know?
Well, and something that I think is interesting, really what you're saying is you cannot if you abandon yourself in religion, even if the leaders are wonderful, you will end up resenting them.
Absolutely.
Because you resent anything where you've abandoned yourself.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to want to blame instead of, like I think about, it's helpful in our marriage. There's a lot of ways that I abandoned myself, and you'd probably say the same thing for you.
Yeah.
But I'm thankful that that's why Pietze's in town. We're getting ready to release a course that we did, and it helps you see how your triggers and understand what's going on inside of you. It's called The Pathway to Freedom, but it helps you be able to own why you abandoned you.
Yeah.
Instead of just blaming. So you didn't make me abandon myself to you. No. I abandoned myself to you for a lot of reasons that I could go into, but it's helpful when you're not blaming them. And I always think that a leader can be crazy, but they cannot force you to abandon yourself.
Absolutely.
That's an inside job.
Well, and that's where you have to, it goes back to what we've been saying this whole kind of podcast little mini series, which is you have to take yourself out of the victim position and own where you actually allowed yourself to be in a position. And obviously there are I do not want to negate, there are true traumas and true victimization situations that happen in the context of the church.
Yes.
But a lot of times it's not black and white like that. It's very gray. And as long as you're the victim and they're the villain, you will never find freedom.
Yeah.
You have to de-villainize people in the church, and you have to unvictimize yourself. And again, it comes back to seeing people as human and yourself as human, And so I think that going on that journey, looking at people, it takes, again, it goes back to what we were saying at the beginning. It takes the hierarchy out of it, where you just begin to see people as human, and it creates safety then, because it's so when a leader would call me on something or challenge me, I would go, thank you so much. I really appreciate that, because I actually want to grow.
Feedback.
And I want feedback. But then I would take that and decide what I felt about it. And if it actually was something that I needed to grow in.
Is this actually true? Is this right about me? Is this what is I'm supposed to become more like, or is it not?
Yeah. And I think because I was not just so insulated in that culture, but I was listening to all different types of teachings and sermons and theology, it kept me balanced of going, well, that's one way to look at it. Yeah. That's one way. And I get to decide if that's the way that I want to look at it. But there's also 3 other theologies that are completely opposite than this.
Yes.
And so where's the balance and where's the tension in this?
Which I want to actually get on another soapbox for a second here, which is I feel very passionate about taking the arrogance out of theologies. Because I've studied theology since I was in high school. In high school, I actually quit school and went into homeschooling so that I could spend more time studying things about God, and went into a deep dive theology course.
You are the cutest kid. You are the cutest kid.
I was funny. But so since I was in 9th grade, have been and I love reading books about theology and understanding different people's worldviews. And one of the things that I've learned is that there's no way to figure out the perfect theology and know that you haven't. There's no way. There's so many. We have the same book, the Bible, and we have people who've written stories every direction of it. Healing does exist. Healing doesn't exist. This is what the cross meant. This is what everybody has different definitions of what happened, what sin nature means, all of it. I'm failing every theological word I know right now, but there's so many points of what is the relationship of the Trinity like? And there's so many points of theology.
Absolutely. Even down to if you're familiar with theology, Arminianism versus Calvinism.
Yes.
There are cases that you could make strongly for both, and you would be so convinced. And the problem is that both are right and both are wrong. We live in the tension between the two.
Yes.
And tension is so hard. It's hard for us as humans to hold tension.
And we want to be right and feel like we're better than other people. And let's just freaking own that as Christians. Like, we say we're humble, but every Christian wants to say that they have the corner on what truth is and how to get you to that truth. And it is such BS. If we could just own, like, none of us, like, I fully acknowledge I'm going to get to heaven and be like, wow, I was wrong about so many things.
I acted like a know-it-all ass.
Totally. And like, wow, you were so much bigger and your world makes so much more sense. And this idea that there's one theology, and that's why I listen to several angles, and then I pick the one that feels true to me and that I know will bring fruit in my life.
Will produce
love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. That's the thing that I measure theology against, is the fruit of the Holy Spirit. In Galatians, it talks about the fruit of the Holy Spirit. And I'm like, oh, well, if this theology doesn't produce faithfulness and self-control and joy and love and peace, then something's missing here. And so it's just,
go ahead.
It is not something where you can strive as a human to achieve and get to become a better human than everyone else. I think the theology journey is important. It honestly set me free from so much pain that I had, because wrong theology makes you believe that there's an angry God who's always frustrated at you, and that will destroy your soul.
Yeah.
If you like having to believe the creator of the universe who created you hates you, that will destroy your soul. So theology is very important, but getting rid of the hierarchy that you can know better than everyone else. And if you are in a church culture like that, you need to actively begin to let go of that belief, that looking down on other people, that seeing other people and being like, they don't get it. I used to be like that, but now I'm more enlightened. I've been in every enlightened circle where I can look at somebody else and say, they're not enlightened, I'm more enlightened. And I'm like, that's not true. I've grown a lot and I have a lot of nuance, but there's beauty in every theology, and there is destruction in every theology.
Isn't that funny how we as humans, like, whether or not we're in the church, want to feel like
we want to be the best.
We want to feel like we're the best. I see that in my friends who are part of other forms of religious expressions or spiritual expressions, and they hit a point of like, I've gotten to enlightenment.
I'm more enlightened than Christianity.
And if everyone could be this enlightened, we would obtain world peace.
Yeah, it's such a human thing to want to feel better, because we don't, deep down inside of our hearts, just feel like we're enough.
Yeah.
Oh, totally.
And we want to really figure out a way to make ourselves be enough. And whether that's through our knowledge or our acts of what we do externally, our performance base, whatever that is, we just want to feel loved.
Yeah.
Well, and I will say this, there's a whole nother element that comes in here, which is that you have to understand how your family of origin plays a part,
theology,
how your theology that you grew up with, and then even the church background that you come up with. You have to understand what your triggers are, because sometimes what will happen is that your own pain shows up and is like a projector.
Yep.
This is what I say. Triggers are like a projector that will project your own reality onto, if you imagine a projector and if someone were to stand, you can see that person, and there's an image being projected on them.
Yes.
That's how triggers work. So you walk into a church, you're not just seeing that church. All of your triggers that show up
all of your history
are painting a narrative around you. And until you understand what is happening inside of you and what it's connected to and getting healing for that, you will assume things or come up with judgments or things that have nothing to do with what's in front of you.
Yes.
And so it's incredibly
why
important.
You guys should get this course that we're creating. That we've created called The Pathway to Freedom.
But it really came out of this.
Yeah.
It came out of these seasons of us walking through this stuff and realizing, whoa, there are things at play underneath the surface. from pain, that have evolved from pain, that are affecting our lives in a way that if we cannot understand what they are,
we can't change them. We can't change our future. We can't. We'll repeat the same cycle over and over again, and we won't understand what's going on.
And I know we keep bringing this up. It sounds like we're plugging these things all the time. But the reason that you guys have all these products, the reason that we came out with this course are because we've been so broken, and we had to come up with solutions. Yeah, we've been so broken that, and we've all just longed. It's like what Abby was saying in the last podcast. When you've been through so much pain, it's like we have so much compassion for that because we get it. We get why people make the decisions that they make.
Yes.
That look like bad decisions. Because when you've been so broken and you are in so much pain, it can be so unbelievably difficult. And that's why the judgment from the church and people that are outside of the church judging the church, it's so painful because there's just people in pain, right? It's just people in pain. But when you get that broken, you realize that you just want wholeness so bad. And we've all strived for that. And that's why that's why this course means so much to us because it's changed our lives, because I wouldn't have been able to walk this process without understanding all this, you know?
I remember this reality show on MTV. I don't remember the name of it, but I remember.
I probably can come up with it. I was MTV junkie.
But there was a moment where a woman was having a complete and utter meltdown. She was being very harshly judged, and she was always chronically making problems though. But I remember her just screaming, "You don't know me. You don't know me." And there's this deep thing inside of us as humans. Like you're talking about the concept of the universal pain that's actually happening. And we're all judging each other. And really all humans are screaming, "You really don't know me. You don't know the pain that I'm inside of." And a lot of times we feel so trapped inside of on the other side of these projections that people have. And it hurts so bad because it's like, you don't know me. You don't know what I've been through. You're seeing me through a lens that isn't truly who I actually am. And when you actually begin to understand your own personal triggers inside of your life, you begin to actually alleviate a lot of pain in the space around you, because you can begin to go, oh, I no longer have to project onto this person and judge this person. I don't know them, but I do know something about me. This is my pain. This is my history. This is my problem.
That's really good.
I'm just sitting here being like, I remember praying so much that God would break my judgment. It's not a fun process. I don't recommend that prayer. No, I'm just kidding. But I was just thinking, I was feeling such overwhelming gratitude because I was thinking like, I don't feel better anymore than the person who walks away from their faith.
Yeah.
I understand why they walk away. I'm like, yeah, there's been so much pain. There's been so many times where I felt so hurt by God, whether it was my dad that I was projecting onto God, or the pain of feeling so sick and out of control, and whatever it is, I could walk away. I don't have any judgment on somebody who walks away. I don't have any judgment on somebody who performs so hard and all they're doing is trying to be the perfect Christian because they so badly want to be loved, because I know that feeling of wanting to be loved. I know that feeling of like, I'll do whatever it takes, please. I just want to be good. I don't want to be a bad person. I want to be good. And so I'm like, there's this beautiful gift when you quit like going on the arrogance, and this is where churches hurt people, is when they preach that they are the best way, the only way, the right way, and everything else is wrong. And there is a gift in that. And I want to say, even those churches, I don't judge because of this reason. Revolutions are started by people who are out of balance. Like extremists start revolutions. And so I'm like, I think about, there's been a lot of revolutions that have been incredibly needed. Like feminism was a revolution that was started by extremists. You have to have somebody who is extreme enough to buck the culture that they go all that way. Now, if you follow that entirely and don't find balance, you'll get lost in the system.
Yeah, it can be destructive.
And so even the churches that have a very strong culture where they're like, yes, this is right, I can understand and see the value in that. Even though it may not be how I want to be. And I can understand, like, in seasons where I felt out of control, I needed to be somewhere with this, where there's purpose. The churches that are like, our mission is to save the world. That theology was really good for me when I needed a purpose so I didn't freaking kill myself.
Yeah.
I needed something that said you're alive for a purpose.
Yeah.
And then I needed a season where the theology wasn't you're alive to do something for God. I needed a season where it was you're alive because God wants to love you.
Yeah.
And that's it. And if you never do anything, and then I got to the place where I felt so loved not doing anything, but then I needed purpose again. And so then I figured out how to marry the two. And I just want to give you guys, if you're listening, the ability to step off the pride pedestal.
Yeah.
And some of you have been hurt by the pride pedestal. So don't judge the pride pedestal, and also don't sit on it.
Yeah.
We could call it the seat of judgment. The Shack movie and the Shack book have such a good analogy about getting off the seat of judgment, and it's so important.
Well, and I will say, to bring it full circle, now when I look back, because I ended up staying in that church for a while, and it had an amazing community. There were some really great things. There were some things when I left that church that I had to detox.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a next step of healing that came in my journey that I think we'll probably talk about at some point. But, you know, I think for me, looking back, I have no ill will towards the church. Like, what I'm doing is I'm getting rid of all the people that have hurt me. I can look back and go, but also you added good to my life, and you're a human being who was in a lot of pain, who caused a mess out of your pain. And it wasn't personal, but it did affect me in a very personal way. But I can have love, because I still see some of these people who have caused, like, they're still in my life. I see them on a regular basis. I'm related to some of them, you know? And so now I can look at them with no judgment, like free of judgment and free of disdain and free of even just, I don't know, like hard feelings. I have a sense of like, I can see it for what it is, and it's covered and saturated in love.
But I will say that when you left, you moved states to actually, you moved from Wisconsin to Colorado, and you left that church. A lot of people who have left have had just cut it completely out.
Yes, have cut it completely out.
And I think that's because they maybe didn't get to have a sense of self while they were in it.
And so everybody's journey
is different.
It's different. And so for some people, you do, when you leave a place, you need to pendulum swing. You need to distance for a while.
I agree.
And what I tell people is just in your distancing, don't make a bigger mess.
Yeah.
You know, like watch that you don't make a bigger mess. Watch that you're not going out completely bad mouthing and you can, but you might have a mess to clean up later.
Sure.
You might cut off relationship with people that you end up feeling sad that you did, you know, but allow yourself to go on the journey of distancing, and that's okay. And that's valid.
Yeah.
And there will come a point where some of those people will be able to be in a healed point and see the good out of that season and not just the bad of being a part of that church, you know?
I'm so sorry. One more thing. I watched you come out of that not broken the way that you should have been. Right. Because there were some things that could have broken you.
Totally.
And you didn't, because you didn't abandon yourself in it.
Yes.
And so it's easier to detox a culture that is good, but also strong. It's easier to do that when you stay true to yourself inside of that culture.
Yeah, that's a good point, Abby.
I think it's kind of cool how God has a way of laying out breadcrumbs. And when we have a tenderized heart of like, yeah, Dad, you're my friend. I just really want you to participate in my process, in my healing process. And you have this childlike approach to the journey of your pain and the journey of healing and working through the questions inside of yourself, that these breadcrumbs will lead you down this journey. Like, I even thought about the idea of you go from this church culture that caused pain, and you end up in this other one that has a strong one, that maybe there's stuff you have to detox out of, and it's not perfect. And he goes, all right, let's come over here. Here's a breadcrumb. Let's go ahead and work on this over here. And then let's move over to this thing. And I've watched a lot of people historically where they'll throw out those entire seasons of their lives and be like, well, I still had to detox and there were all these problems, instead of going and looking at it and asking the question, what are the breadcrumbs all leading to? And what is it that I'm acquiring? What is the beauty of what I'm acquiring through each season?
I love that.
Because when we can connect to that, even like there's probably beautiful things that were acquired out of even the cult like church.
No,
right?
there was a sense of self that got developed in you. You started to recognize your discernment. You started to see, you started to learn to not put leaders on pedestals.
Yeah.
You started to see humanity, and you started to have a relationship with God that was separate from just what people told you to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
there's a huge, and now your relationship with God is so stable. I say this to you all the time, that like you aren't going through huge detoxes and ups and downs, because in your 20s, things were so crazy in so many places. You had to find out what you believed was true for you and how to sit in that. And then you've never given yourself over to people pleasing and abandoning again. And it's created this stable, incredible thing. And that is a beautiful gift you have.
Yeah. And I think it's for anyone who will engage it. If you'll step back and go, all right, well, God, show me the bigger picture, because maybe you've been moving on through these different phases and you're not quite sure what's happening, but these phases are all leading to something bigger, an enlightenment, a freedom, a connection to oneself, a strength inside of oneself, and a liberation. It's really cool. So I like that. And I don't my point was I don't throw out any of those different phases, because I can look back and be like, well, that was still a religious place and those people were still X, Y, and Z, when I was reflecting on my own journey as I was going through each of them. But I also, through that process, healed, because I was able to go, oh, here's the breadcrumbs. This is what this was leading to.
Yes. And when I look back, I'm like, every church organization that I've been a part of, or ministry or whatever, inside the structure of religion, every single one was exactly what I needed at that moment.
Yeah.
And it's not that it didn't cause pain, but they're huge gifts that I can see and take, and even things that I still took with me on the journey, going like, I love this about this place. I'm taking this with me.
And even, I wouldn't even say that. I would say like every church I was in had gifts to give me. I hate saying that it was what I needed, because maybe I needed it, maybe I didn't, but I wound up there and it was great.
Yeah. Well,
because I
just think even the cult, I came right outside of the being under my parents and jumping into feeling a sense of family and feeling purpose and feeling like I had something with my life.
Absolutely.
I needed that in that time.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and then even when I jumped into the new church, like I was like, what they had in ways that people might go, oh, they're really strict or they're really religious, felt safe to me because of the pain from the last place. And it felt really helpful to me to have that structure.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I wasn't disagreeing with the idea. I just wanted people, because I think sometimes if you're a part of something that's very abusive and you go back and you're like, well, I needed that can feel very traumatizing.
I don't know that that's
but she was clarifying what you needed. Like, oh, out of that, I didn't need the rest of the garbage.
Yeah.
But there was an element inside of it that was needed for my soul, and I was able to extract that.
Yes.
For that time, and then when there is a relationship with a good, loving creator, there's also the doorway to restoration for all the other mess that happens inside of humanity as we go. And that's where I've come to a place of trust, in the sense of, it's not that like when I show up inside of relationship with an institution of people, I'm like, it's not that I trust that they have it all together. I just trust that I have a creator that has it all together. And I trust my life with that. And I go, there could be a bunch of messes when I'm engaging this person, this relationship, this space. Most likely there's going to be. They're all human. I trust Papa to come in and make up for the deficits.
Yeah,
I think it's my belief in a redeeming God.
Right.
That makes me not afraid of churches, because there's never going to be one that I agree with.
Or a lot of the other,
fully. That's what I mean. I was like, that didn't sound right. There's never going to be one that I think, oh, you figured it all out.
You've cornered the market.
Yeah.
You're so enlightened, and we're all going to jump on Haley Bop comment.
I don't know what that is.
There was a cult that all drank juice back in the 90s.
Oh, gosh.
I think it was.
Oh.
Okay, well, on that note, don't do that. There is redemption for every story that you've been in. Go on the journey that you need to go on. Have compassion, have time. Give your heart permission to heal. That's one of the things that I feel really grateful is that I've been really hurt by churches, and I've taken time that I need to heal, and I manage myself in that. I remember being at a place where I'd been hurt, and you always hear people are like scared that if you take time away to detox that you'll like die. You'll basically
my parents
become
were
the worst.
terrified.
They were terrified when me and you stopped going to church.
And I remember pushing back and saying, I know that this feels crazy, but we have to go on this. Like, you have to give us space to go on this journey.
Yeah. And it took a lot to have self-awareness, but I knew I would actually hate and blow up my life more if I stayed in the system of control. That being said, also one of the best things about church is finding people who, there are really good, loving people.
Yeah.
Some of the most loving humans I have met have been inside of church, and there are people who have good natures and who are faithful and who want to stick with you no matter what, and who fight for you.
My closest relationships and some of my best friends have come from my different churches that I keep with me to this day. They're precious to me.
Yeah. So there's a lot, and there's some beautiful things of places where I know, like, even for example, the church I go to now really believes in healing. And that was really good for me to have that anchor point when I was so sick, is having a place that could hold a belief that I couldn't hold on to.
That fostered a sense of hope for your future.
Yep.
It's good.
So there's a gift in it. There's a gift in going on your journey. Have compassion. Please, please, please walk away from this episode and let go of hierarchy, of believing that you're better than people. And you have a corner on truth. Go on the journey of loving God and inviting him to show you who he is through every season, and know that you'll never achieve and you'll never arrive, and you'll always be learning more about him, and you'll always be growing more like him, and you'll always have people that you'll need to apologize for all the crazy things that you did in the past. And that's just part of being life.
Yes.
Yep. Anything else?
We love you guys.
Oh, actually, I do have one more thing. Sign-ups for the Pathway to Freedom start next week on August 16th. That's Monday, August 16th.
Yeah.
And then it will be starting September 29th on my birthday.
And this is going to be, so it's a 3-month course, and it is going to 10-week course, something like that. And it is going to be a live course where you watch pre-recorded videos, and then there's a live immersion program with it, because we've seen so many people's lives transformed by that. And me and Pietze are going to lead one of the things for the immersion program this first time as a special.
Yay.
I'm done. I'm leaving. I'm going to go eat food now. Goodbye.